Welcome, everybody, to the Monday, December 2nd, 2019 session of the Lake Forest City Council. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Honorable Mayor Pantaleon?
Here.
Alderman Beidler is absent. Alderman Morris?
Here.
Alderman Notes?
Here.
Alderman Rummel?
Here.
Alderman Preschlack?
Here.
Alderman Kashkarian?
Here.
Alderman Moreno?
Here.
Alderman Bushman?
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Biddy. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda tonight is comments by the mayor. The first item on my number of comments is a presentation of a Lake Forest flag to the Woodlands Academy of the Sacred Heart. Meg Steele, the head of school, would you please come up and join us? Would you like to say anything?
Like to briefly say thank you. This came about when Melanie was visiting Woodlands Academy at the beginning of the year, and we have a flag ceremony where flags are presented representing all of the countries for which our students and or faculty and staff have either dual citizenship or where they were born. And Melanie looked and said, "What about Lake Forest?" And I went, "Oh yes, we are missing that." So just wanted to say a very brief thank you for making this possible.
Okay, great. Well, I think the flag is over here, so.
Great.
Oh, look, there we have it on the video. Should we switch together?
There you go, right there. Thank you. Always thinking.
And one of the things that we always stress is the wide variety of educational opportunities in different schools with different structures and purposes that we have in Lake Forest. And Woodlands is another example of just a fabulous, single-sex opportunity for young women. And my daughter has a number of very close friends that went there and had a wonderful experience. And it's, again, just another of the many, many, many educational options we have, starting with outstanding public schools and going to, private schools that are ranked nationally. So thank you very much. And I understand you're relatively new in your role, so congratulations and welcome to Lake Forest. The second item on my list is acceptance of a gift from the Friends of Lake Forest Parks and Recreation Foundation. Jacqueline Grisha, Vice President of the Friends Foundation.
Hi, I am Jackie Greca. I am the Vice President of the Friends of Lake Forest Parks and Rec Foundation, and I am here today to gift back the Comfort Station that is at the Deer Path Golf Course. The Comfort Station has been completed and has been used throughout the summer at the Fred Jackson golf outing. It's also been used by the golfers during the season and by the residents on the trails. It was widely received, and we thank you for the opportunity to work on it.
Well, thank you. It's beautiful structure. Everybody I know who's seen it said it's fabulous, and we certainly appreciate the ongoing philanthropy that Lake Forest, the Friends of Parks and Rec represent. They recently organized the tree lighting ceremony on Friday night, and it's just one thing after another. So thank you very much. This acceptance of this will be on our omnibus agenda later on in the evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes my comments. So the next item on the agenda is comments by the city manager.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mayor and members of City Council. And I would say, piggybacking on some of the mayor's comments about the wealth of educational institutions that we have in the community here, I'm pleased to welcome back what I think are semi-regular presenters in our Community Spotlight Series, and that's representatives from School District 67. As you know, the city and the school district have always had a close working relationship. We welcome the opportunity to hear what's going on at our local elementary and middle schools. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Mike Burkowski, President of the Board of Education, and Mike Simic, Superintendent.
Thank you all for having us. Tonight, we're just going to provide a quick overview of District 67. District 67 covers K through 8 in the public schools that the mayor mentioned a moment ago. Before we jump into the presentation, it's worth mentioning that while we manage and maintain the buildings, the city, under your leadership, actually owns the buildings. So we're your tenants and you own the buildings. So we'll touch on a number of things, including education and finance, but we'll also talk a little bit about your buildings. So District 67 has 4 school buildings covering kindergarten through 8th grade, as I mentioned. Deer Path Middle School is grades 5 through 8. Everett, Cherokee, and Sheridan are the elementary schools, K through 4. Each of them have between 200 and 300 students. So we have a little less than 1,700 students in total. In 2014, 5 years ago, we undertook really creating a new vision and mission for our school district. I'm not going to read every word to you up there, but I'm going to mention a few words that I feel really differentiate our school district from many others. Under the mission, you see the word all students. So we're not to the average student, we're not to the mean or the median or to some students. We strive to do every single student, and that presents its own set of challenges. You also see the word growth up there. We certainly strive achievement and regular academics, but we also put a real high emphasis on every student growing, wherever he or she may be. And you also see the word balance. It's not solely about academics. We really look at the entire person, the academics, the extracurriculars, their social emotional well-being as well. In the vision statement, you see the words innovative learning community. And our superintendent will talk in a minute about what our classrooms and learning looks like. It looks very different than when any of us were in school a few years back. And you also see the words discovering their passions. We want our students not only to learn English and math, but we want them to learn about themselves. We want them to learn what really drives them, what are their passions, and what are they going to do with that for the rest of their lives. In addition to the mission and vision statements, we created 6 milestones, which you see on the slide. And these 6 milestones let us know how we're doing. Are we making progress? So we're 5 years into this vision and mission, and we're constantly, as a board, charged with oversight, looking at these milestones to see, are we making progress? So we have achievement, instruction, assessment, talent, partnership, and the last one that you don't see up there is environment. And environment means reimagining our learning spaces. And as the landlord, as the owner of the building, you're particularly interested in that as we talk about what we're doing with the buildings. So now I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent, and he's going to talk about some of the tangible things that we're doing to affect these milestones.
And I would like to first thank Alderman Morris. He arranged a visit for me and our high school principal to speak at on Wednesday, and it was there that one of the members said, you know, you guys have done a lot with your buildings. You should go and talk to the city council about that. And that is what prompted us to come here today. So the environment milestone is to reimagine learning spaces, places, time, tools, and technology that are used inside and outside the classroom to enhance the learning experience for all students. And this was really a challenge for us. How do we take 50s and 60s buildings and not ask for a referendum and then prudently transform these into modern workspaces for students? This, the rows here, teacher's desk in the front, the blackboard, and this is what all of us went to school learning in. And this setting here, this is from the renovated Deer Path. These chairs are mobile, they're flexible, they're softer. Also, the blackboards, the whiteboards up there are removable. Kids can take them to their place. They can set them on the ground. It's extremely flexible. So we've done a great many things to all of the buildings. This is what's known as the Cube. This is the first one of the things that we did in 2012. This is the library on the west side, or excuse me, on the east side, on the 5-6. You'll see engaging, colorful. There's a green screen. The students utilize this all the time for a variety of different projects. They make their own news. There's a real emphasis on the spaces providing an impetus for kids to be able to express themselves. Flexibility is at a premium. We've also renovated all of the playgrounds. One at Everett was in partnership with the city as well. Cherokee and Sheridan. Sheridan was a very extensive project. All of them are wheelchair accessible. They have ramps and soft play surfaces. Other things we've done have had an emphasis on safety. So on the right, you see the vestibule. We put vestibules on the fronts of all of the buildings. And in this past summer, we installed ramps. Let's see if I can back up. This ramp on the 5-6 side of Deer Path. And what's important is that these things affect every single student in the building. So it's a very significant project. The first time that I came and observed this in use, a student was going down the ramp on crutches. So we often think of ramps being for a student in a wheelchair, but at any moment in time, every student in the building can be positively affected by the improvements. This is a recent renovation. The library, the Haskins, the H2O as it's called now at Deer Path. Reminiscent of the Spanish Stair in Rome, highly engaging, flexible spaces. Utilize the teacher is in front here, kids sitting on there for whatever reason. Kids just like the people in Rome are drawn to hard things to sit on, and there they sit. Again, very bright, very colorful, a lot of different collaborative learning spaces in them. This space here, the entire wall here is both movable and a writable surface. So get kids up and moving. All of the seating is either soft or flexible. This is the classroom when it's opened up. It's used for professional development for teachers as well. These little cubbies here, we thought there's no way anybody was ever going to be seated in them because they're outside the administrative offices. There's always a kid in them, sometimes making faces, but there they are. And I wanted to show you what the environment looks like now. All of the improvements that we've made have been done with all students in mind, and particularly we wanted to not just remove carpet, but we wanted to have flexible and engaging spaces for our students. So this is a classroom at Cherokee. I'm going to play this several times so you can take a closer look. Notice the type of seating, where kids are. Try to find the teacher if you can. And notice how engaged every student in the classroom is in a different way. Highly differentiated instruction. The teacher is here. It is really common to go into a classroom and struggle to find where the teacher is. And it's not that the students aren't engaged, it's not that they're not busy, they are. One of the things that has really changed since we were in school is the teacher was the hardest working person in the classroom. Today, we absolutely want the children to be the hardest working people in the classroom. And when the kids are involved is when they're learning. And I have to exit out of this and get back to our presentation. And I might need to phone a friend. There we go. The final thing that we're going to be doing that we want to speak to tonight is the renovation of the science labs on both sides of the building. So these are renderings, very tired spaces. These are two huge classrooms now put together, but then with a click of a flip of a switch, you can divide that into two. Again, all these surfaces are writing surfaces. In the prior video, one of the transformational things that we discovered, all the furniture that the little kids were using, every single desktop is a writable surface, and the kids use it all the time. They use it to make notes to themselves, to plan their day, to write down their goals so that they remember things. Increasingly flexible use of space. One thing, where is it? There it is right there. This is a garage door. Actually a garage door, and it's glass, and it flips up, and then when it's open you walk out into, and this is a recaptured hallway space. So this entire thing was formerly not used as instructional areas. These are the spaces that schools in the area are discovering are some of the most used and most flexible spaces that were formerly merely used during passing periods. And now this entire area outside will be flexible space for working in small groups or larger groups or what have you. And this is a way that work is getting done in the workplace more and more. There's no more individual work. It is collaborative and collective work. And with that, I'd like to hand back off to Mr. Borkowski.
Thank you. So last topic we will briefly touch on is finances, and this is an area that our Board of Education shares with, obviously, the City Council as well. You have financial oversight over the city. We've got financial oversight over our school district. It's important to note that almost all of our revenue comes from local property taxes. We get a little from the state, a little from the feds, but not much. Almost all of it comes from Lake Forest taxpayers. So that's where our focus is. We're happy to be one of only 73 school districts across the United States who have earned the top bond rating. We're AAA rated, which is a rare and big deal in the world of education. We've achieved the highest category of financial strength that the Illinois State Board of Education defines. And within Lake County, we're the second lowest school district tax rate and the third lowest in the state. So that last point, I won't go over every number on this, but I'll point out a few things. If you look at an $800,000 market value house, which is about the average price in Lake Forest, that $800,000 house is paying $3,626 to District 67, so $3,600. You see our neighboring communities, all of them are significantly more. Most of them are more than double. We consider Winnetka sort of one of the other school districts that is most comparable to us in terms of demographics, high achieving, income levels, et cetera. Where our taxpayers are paying $3,600, Winnetka's taxpayers are paying $8,300, 130% more. So we really try to do a good job of keeping our tax rate as low as possible and really being fiscally responsible with every dollar. Those are the highlights we wanted to cover with you. We're happy to entertain any questions you might have. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time.
Alderman Morris.
I have 4 grandchildren that are going to Everett and Cherokee, and I've been down there quite a few times visiting classrooms, and they're terrific. Kids are doing a super job, and my grandchildren are benefiting from it, so thank you.
Thank you.
I can tell you as an alumni of these schools, it looks very different on the inside than my school days or my children's school days, who also went to the Lake Forest schools. So it's exciting space. Good job.
Thank you.
I'm just curious how you do it, how you achieve so much with relatively low, the lowest from the peer group, taxes. What do you attribute that to?
I'll say a few things, and you certainly can add it. Both the board and the administration are extremely closely aligned on being the best fiscal stewards that we can possibly be. So it starts with conservative financial oversight. We have 5-year budgets, and we're conservative on every one of those line items. We have many, many discussions with the administration. What are the priorities as we look out over the next 5 years? Yes, over the next 6 months and 12 months, and emergencies happen, and we have a fund balance to deal with rainy days. But we are almost on a monthly basis talking about what are the 5-year priorities and how we're going to do that. We really don't entertain the idea that a referendum is something that we even will talk about. So our sort of starting assumption is we have this bucket of money, how are we going to best utilize it? You might talk about your prioritization process, what you bring to us.
Yeah, we, as Mike mentioned, have a very productive collaborative relationship with our board, who are constantly challenging us. What is the highest and best use of our tax dollars, and to what should we be utilizing those for from 1 month or 1 year to the next? And a constant challenge to live out the vision and achieve the milestones. What has presented itself as a significant opportunity has been a decline in enrollment, and we have been able to utilize those tax dollars excuse me, that are captured from that. And instead of looking to a referendum, take that as an opportunity to revitalize aging buildings. So we had carpet in all the buildings. We had asbestos tile throughout all the buildings. We redid all the lighting. The lighting was a surprise, for example. We built several test classrooms to test out different ideas, flexible furniture, seating, variety of those things. The lighting was the #1 thing that our staff said they wanted, because they could create different moods within the classroom by having banks of light and higher or lower Kelvin. So the staff have been highly involved in that. And then ongoing, repeated conversations about what is next, and not just what we can afford, but what do we need to do to challenge ourselves and our staff and provide a more engaging learning experience for our kids. But Mike is as good as anybody I've ever worked with at saying, okay, if you could accelerate the vision, what would it look like, and how could you get that done? And that constant challenge is really a productive one for us.
Very impressive.
Just one last comment. I want to express my personal thanks again. All of my children have gone through 67, and like some of us up here, I too went through 67. And I want to express deep gratitude to Mike Simic for your leadership and the role you have with staff and faculty, and certainly you, Mike Borkowski, for being mindful and a good steward of the taxpayers' money, with our primary objective being the superior education that you guys have delivered. And we all owe you a deep debt of gratitude. So thank you very much.
Thank you for what you do.
Well done. Other comments? I'd just like to comment on a recent series of experiences I've had as an MC of school trips to City Hall by 3rd graders and 4th graders and 5th graders and munchkins with the mayor. I've been on a roll with District 67 for the last few weeks, and what I was most impressed by was the level of preparation and organization. The financial sophistication of some of these 8-year-olds is pretty staggering. I asked them at one point what a pension was, and they didn't really know, but I started to describe it, and one of the kids raised his hand and said, "You mean like a Roth IRA? I have one of those." So, but seriously, they, I'm sure if I was a 3rd grade teacher, I'd get those things every day, but I don't see that every day. But every single class, every single student, as far as I can tell, I didn't take attendance, has sent personally written thank you notes for each of those trips. And I think, I know how hard it is to get 3rd graders, 4th graders, and 5th graders to write thank you notes. So you're doing something right there. And just teaching kids to be thankful is something that I'm not sure happens in every school district. So thank you for your great work and your fiscal stewardship. The other thing I'd point out is, we talk about our tax rates, and the city is sort of similar. We come in at the lower end of our peers. When you add it all up, the differences in dollars, just in dollars of cost of ownership around the North Shore, are quite significant. I mean, we're talking about, the monthly payment on an Audi, just in the difference in property taxes. We're talking in some cases $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year higher property taxes on the same house. So that's something that I think we're all going to be hearing more about in more detail, because we talk about percentages and sometimes we lose track of what those really mean. But when you say, what's my monthly payment on that? In many cases, it's the monthly payment on the taxes is more than the monthly payment on a mortgage on a house of that value. So, and that's something we really have an advantage of. And we obviously owe you and District 115, and Mike, you're the superintendent of both of those districts, a great deal of credit for that. So thank you for all of that, and providing an excellent education for the children here on top of it all. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the Finance Committee, and I will defer to Chairman Morris.
Very good. Well, we have another good news story to follow up on that one. And this is with the Gorton Community Center. So Tim and everyone, if you'd like to come up. Tim Hender's the chairman of the board of directors, and Amy Wagliardo is the executive director, and then Nick Bothfield is the finance chair. So we're going to let them present it. We had a chance, Director Holub and I had a chance to meet with them earlier in the month to go over their 2020 budget. I think it's quite a good story, but I'll let Tim go forward.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Hender. I am the board chairman at the Gorton Community Center, and I'd like to thank you all for your service and just give a brief intro to what's going on at Gorton and what goes through our budgetary process. Jason, I think at this meeting last year, you were introduced as city manager, so congratulations on 1 year.
That's right.
And I'd also like to make one special request. I think we have the highest flagpole in the city at Gorton, and we don't have one of those flags. So
How much do those flags cost?
I don't know. We have, so that you know, we have over $5 million now in our endowment. So we've got a couple dollars if you don't want to give us one to buy one. But we would love to have one. Pursuant to the 2013 City and Gorton Agreement, we are to present our budget to the City Council every year. That agreement was updated in 2019, so we're here to present that budget. So that you know, Amy, our executive director, who's here tonight, and Nick Bothfeld, who is our city finance chair, are here with me. Amy and her team start collecting data and looking at how things have gone for the current year. And then they start to put together a preliminary budget in the summer of the year prior to the one they're putting it together for. In the early fall, the finance committee at Gorton Community Center will meet. We'll review the preliminary budget. We'll have discussions about it. We will then bring it to our October board meeting, where it will be presented to the board, be open for discussion, and then ratified at the November meeting, and then presented to the City Council here in December. So that's the process. It's an extensive process. Amy does a lot of work with her team, and we're very proud of the budgets that we've been able to put together. The state of the financial situation is very strong at Gorton. Programming is going incredibly well. We're coming off of 2 weeks ago a sold-out performance of Second City. I was there on Friday. We had 225 people, mostly kids, to see the movie Home Alone prior to the tree lighting ceremony here in Lake Forest. So, I mean, like, Gorton is buzzing, it's booming, it's busy, and I feel really proud of what Amy and her team are doing to carry out our mission. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she'll give you more update on what's going on at Gorton. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I also want to thank the City Council for your advocacy and support of Gorton and for coming to Gorton and attending our events. It's always nice to see you there. And also thank the city. We love our relationship with the city and the number of staff members, the police, the fire, everyone that is so supportive of us and our programming. It's really, it's a group effort here in Lake Forest, and we really appreciate that. And if you've been to a Gorton event, you know that when there's 250 to 300 people in the theater, that means positive economic impact on the city because people are eating beforehand or going to drinks afterwards. They're buying flowers for their kids for a play. You know, they're doing things in town before and after they're at Gorton. So we're really proud of that as well. Gorton, this is what I'm going to cover today. Our mission and vision, a review of kind of our success factors this year, our priorities for 2020, and then a quick comparison of the budget and answer any questions you might have. Our mission statement has remained the same. We went through a visioning process starting last year, and it completed in February of 2019. And we reviewed the mission and decided that it was a good one, and so we stuck with it. And then we created a vision statement for Gorton to go along with the 3-year strategic vision that was voted through by the board in February, and then this is the one that you see. Gorton engages and enriches all generations through vibrant social experiences and exceptional arts and culture. And that's what we strive to do, and what we will continue to strive to do as we go forward. In 2019, we had a number of accomplishments. The endowment continued to build through the Community Spirit Transform campaign. This is the last major year of that campaign. We do have a few payments in 2020, but most of the payments are completed in 2019. We completed a 3-year strategic plan, as I mentioned, and approved by the board. Our numbers there on the patrons and events are not correct, but I noticed that as we were here earlier. We've had 3,000 transactions, but that's not the number of patrons, and I think it's closer to 500 events, not 5,000. So apologies for that on the slide. But we have met our strategic engagement goal this year of a 20% increase over 2018. Also, as part of our strategic engagement goal, we were to increase daily contract rent overall over 5%, and we've been able to do that. And then we had a tenant leave in early 2019, and we've released that space, and we've reconfigured some space in the building so that we have different spaces rented by different tenants, different rooms being used by Gorton, but we are completely leased for now and through 2020. And actually, we're going on new 2-year leases, so it'll be through 2021 unless someone leaves. And we have calls all the time for office space, so we feel like that we're doing okay there. And we completed a refresh of the Gorton brand. We have a new logo, new colors. We've updated our website interface, and we just have an overall new integrated look to our advertising. And we've expanded and deepened in classes, films, and other offerings. Some of the new classes that we offered in 2019 include the etiquette series, and also we had a very cool event just a few weeks ago. The Left-Handed Pianist was our first work-in-progress documentary screening, which Diane Kwan, a Lake Forest resident, is one of the producers. She was there along with the film's directors, the film's star, and we got to see parts of the film and hear the film's star perform. And they're going to bring the completed film back to Gorton in 2020, and we're very excited about that. These are some other just sort of updates on things that we did in 2019. We are always, through our capital plan, enhancing the interior facility. We changed out our refrigerators. We paint one level every year. We've been updating the bathrooms, and thanks to a very generous gift recently from the Sheffields, we are going to put in some very nice new theater lighting. We have our regular and sort of beloved community programming that we have throughout the year that repeats, and then we're always continuing to add new programming. Our newest on the live entertainment side series is Gorton Center Live, which is all live music. We've had one concert. We have 8 concerts between October and May. We have 2 this month, 1 this Friday, and these are singer-songwriters. They're very I don't know, for lack of a better word, they're hip, they're cool. And they're things that you can do without going to the city and have a really cool night out. These are a couple of quotes that we like and like to share with everyone. And that's just, we get calls and people stopping in just to tell us thank you, which is nice. So our strategic plan includes 4 areas of focus: awareness, board development, fundraising, and strategic programming. This is reflected in the budget, and I will go into more detail when we get to the budget page. These goals are for each year, so we are going to meet our goals for 2019, and we will be looking to do those again in 2020, 2021. The strategic programming goal is the one that is affecting the budget the most in 2020, because we're really investing in that area and not expecting full revenue from some of those strategic investments in 2020, because it's all new and we're trying new things. So we wanted to be very conservative in our approach when we put it in the budget. And then we're also going to we did a little bit of a deep dive this year into our live events, did some surveying and small group focus groups. We'll be doing that on our classes and class structure in 2020. So this is the overall budget for 2020 compared to 2019. I mentioned that we have seen we plan to see, and we have a few weeks left, the 5% increase in contributions, which is very important to the vibrancy and health of Gorton. It might appear that the contributions are going down. It's actually 5% increase overall. Again, it's just that we had a board event listed in our budget under contributions that had turned into the Second City event, and which is really not a fundraising event anymore. It's just another event that we do. So we moved that up to the sponsorship line, which is in programs and events. So if you tie the two, if you look in the detail and tie the two together, the sponsorship and the charitable contributions, you'll see the 5% increase. And then you see the hit to programs and events that I was discussing with regard to the investment in the strategic programming that we're taking on in 2020 and 2021. We have fully loaded the expenses, but have not fully loaded revenue, because it's new for us and we felt that this was the most prudent thing to do. I also wanted to mention, I think we discussed this last year on the drop-in center, because we were projecting a loss. And we started taking steps to figure out what it was that was causing the loss last year. But because it runs on a school year and we have a calendar fiscal year, we are now seeing positive numbers this fall, now that we're starting on the next school year. So that's why we feel like we'll pretty much break even next year, and we'll correct the issue that we were seeing in the drop-in. Basically, what it was the infant room was always full. We kind of, historically, it'd been sort of across the board. But when the infant room, which has a much smaller teacher ratio, is always full, and the preschool room is maybe just average full, then it messes with the budget. So we've adjusted this, and now we feel like the rates and the way that we're approaching the timing of the teachers will affect the budget. It is actually already affecting the budget, but we won't see that fully on the drop-in center until we get through a whole school year, which is in the middle of next year. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have about the budget.
Well, you anticipated my question. Thank you very much on the drop-in center. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes, of
You know,
course.
it's near and dear to my heart. And so when I saw some of those negative numbers, yes, I was concerned. So thank you for pointing that out.
Well, I will also say that there was a reclass in that after our audit, there was we overstated salaries that had to be, there was a reclass done. It was just a timing issue, so it's actually a little bit, the loss is not as great as that. It's just, it looks like a big number there, but it's closer to zero by the end of the year.
Thank you. I still hear rave reviews about the centers, so.
Thank you.
You know, I'm just delighted that it's still going strong. Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments?
I just make a comment. Director Holub and I have had a chance to work with Amy and the team for a number of years, watching the budget get larger and larger every year as the programs got hypercharged, I would say, when you look at the number of events that are going on. And at the same time, the endowment has gone up to $5 million, which is pretty amazing over that period of time. So it's really a nice job that they've done.
Other comments or questions? Any member of the public that would like to comment on the presentation about Gorton? Okay.
Yes, I'm going to turn it over to Nick.
Oh, great. Thought we were done. Sorry.
So I am the city director, Nick Bothfeld, by the way, city director, serve as the finance chair for Gorton, and just wanted to assure everybody here that I think you heard the level of detail that Amy gets into, and it's impressive. Along with Karen in the back, who is in charge of all the budget and all the, accounting and everything. And then we do have the wonderful stewardship of Tim, who's been the continuity over years and years now, from those dark days to where we are today. And so it's been my pleasure. It's been a delight, actually. And have extremely high confidence in the budget and the ability to deliver on that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So
Alderman Morris?
I recommend approval of the budget.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Kashkarian?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a wonderful job. I very, very vividly remember those dark days. And to see where Gorton is today is, I'm glad we were able to keep it off the ground. So, next item on the agenda is consideration of an ordinance establishing the 2019 tax levy. This is the second reading and final approval. Elizabeth Holub will take us through it.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As the Mayor noted, this is the second and final reading for the 2019 property tax levy ordinance. I have the same slides here in the same presentation that I did on November 18th. I'm happy to do that or happy to answer any questions, but just as a highlight, in November we reviewed both the statutory and self-imposed limitations on the tax levy. We went through a number of schedules related to the development of the proposed property tax levy. One item to note that based on current estimates, the total assessed valuation citywide is projected to decrease 1.9%, and that is largely related to it being a general assessment year where they look at every parcel, and the Shields Township assessor was here a few weeks ago to discuss that process with you. And so we have recommended here an aggregate levy increase of 4.64%. We've got on this slide factoring in the adjustment in the assessed valuation citywide. The average $800,000 home in Lake Forest would see an increase of $130 on the city and library combined portion of the tax levy, which is about 24% of the total. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Included in this version of the ordinance are the numbers from School District 67. Those are provided by the school district and just incorporated into the tax levy ordinance due to the charter status of the school district.
Questions? Comments? I actually have one. What would the increase in the levy be if we deducted all of the voluntary pension enhancement, pension funding enhancements that we've chosen to do in order to get control of our pension situation?
Sure, that is best evidenced by this attachment 2, which really goes through the detailed line item of the tax levy.
You can see in the second subsection there of the pension funds, there's a significant increase in both police and fire. That is related to the approach change that the city has taken to be more proactive, increase the contributions in an effort to mitigate the 8 to 9% annual increase we were seeing in total obligations. So if you take those out, essentially all of the line items other than debt service are either at the 1.9% property tax levy cap that is applicable to non-home rule communities in the collar counties, with the exception of debt service. That scheduled increase in debt service is also offset by the reduction in the capital improvements levy. So it would be about 2% absent the increases in the pension.
And with this new levy, we'll continue to have significantly lower taxes than our competing communities?
Correct, because we have really brought down the ramp going forward. And so as we transition to a higher funded ratio compared to other communities, the city's going to be able to do that with reduced increases year to year because of the increased contributions up front, similar to paying off a mortgage more quickly than
as opposed to paying the minimum balance on your credit card.
Exactly.
I may be jumping to something that's going to come up later, but I think it's relevant in this context. Maybe you could give us a little briefing about Moody's rating of our soon-to-be bond issue.
Sure. So we do have that as part of the bond ordinance presentation, but we did receive the Moody's credit opinion last week on the proposed refunding. With the assignment to the new issue and affirmation of the AAA rating on all of the city's outstanding debt, and some very complimentary notes in the credit opinion related to the city's approach to pension funding, as well as the increased reserves in the general fund, both being very proactive steps, and Moody's was very complimentary of that.
Thank you. Opportunity for the public to comment on the tax levy. Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay, roll call vote.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Rommel?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Kashkarian?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you, Elizabeth, for a very clear presentation over many different sessions of this complicated subject. Next item on our agenda is consideration of an ordinance approving a fee schedule and ordinances adopting new fees. This is also second reading and final approval. And again, Elizabeth, take it away.
Thank you again. This was included on your November 12th budget workshop as well as your November 18th city council agenda. No changes have been made from first reading. This is a summary of the proposed new or revised fees for FY21. And you can see in the right column the projected annual revenue to be generated by the changes in fees. I would note, as I did November 18th, the water rates are not included here. Based on discussion at the November 12th budget workshop, we were going to do some additional work and bring that back to you at your Finance Committee meeting in January before taking action on water rates for FY21. But presented our proposed ordinance, both the ordinance adopting the revised fee schedule as well as the additional ordinances on the few new fees that were proposed.
Any questions or comments from the council? Any members of the public that would like to speak about the fee schedule? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Morris?
Roll call vote?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Rommel?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack? Alderman Kashkarian?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy. Elizabeth is going to get to stay up there for a minute. The next item on the agenda is consideration of an ordinance providing for the issuance of not to exceed $19.5 million in general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2019, for the purpose of refunding certain outstanding general obligation bonds of the city. providing for the levy and collection of a direct annual tax sufficient to pay the principal of and interest on said bonds, authorizing and directing the execution of an escrow agreement in connection with the issuance of such bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to the winning bidder thereof. This is again second reading and final approval.
Thank you. Again, we brought this to the City Council Finance Committee initially in October with some projected numbers that the city could benefit financially by refunding or essentially refinancing some of its outstanding debt and issuing new bonds at a lower interest rate to refinance or pay off the existing obligations. This is a current schedule of debt service obligations by fund and fiscal year. We have provided, highlighted in yellow there, the maturities that are being targeted in the refunding, with the far right column being the projected potential refunding savings by year. You can see that those savings are spread across different funds. So we would have a sales tax fund, the debt levy, the water fund, and the golf course fund would all share in those savings. You can see that in any given year, it's not a significant savings, but overall, the bottom line is projected about $964,000 in present value savings based on current bond market conditions. The City Council granted first reading approval on November 18th to a parameters ordinance, which essentially sets forth the objectives of the refunding. On November 18th, we talked about setting a 3% floor or minimum savings as a percent of the refunded bonds. We talked about increasing that to 5%, which would be more reflective of the projection shared with you on October 21st. So the version of the ordinance presented tonight for final approval does include 5% as the minimum floor for savings for that sale to go forward. Talking a little bit about the schedule, as we noted on November 18th, we had the Moody's rating call to assign a rating on the proposed refunding. We did not have a final report yet, which we did receive last week. Moody's assigned a AAA to the proposed refunding, as well as affirming the AAA rating on all of the city's outstanding debt. We have now presented to you final approval of the parameters bond ordinance. The auction for the bonds is scheduled for Wednesday. It was noted that we did not want to go ahead with an auction this morning because of the Thanksgiving holiday. We thought that might impact the number of bidders on the bonds. And given the storms that took place over the Thanksgiving holiday, I've been told that was probably a wise move. So we would use the parameters that you approved this evening. If the bond ordinance is approved, we would go to auction. There would be an online auction on Wednesday morning, and we would discuss the results of that bid with the mayor on Wednesday and determine at that point whether the low bid would be accepted. And if that takes place and the 5% savings are realized in the low bid, we would go forward and close on that bond issue on December 19th. We talked a little bit about the bond rating. This print is too tiny, but you've all received the full credit opinion from Moody's. But what I think is particularly noteworthy is that is the transparency with which Moody's is now providing ratings, which we did not have a few years ago. So in the credit opinion, you have the full scorecard of the different metrics that Moody's looked at in evaluating and providing a rating on the bond issue. You can see which items fell in a AAA category and which did not, which indicates some potential weakness. And you can see that the overall scorecard did come out with a composite score of AAA, and that is what the rating committee ended up awarding to the bond issue. So I think it is great that we have this information and we know exactly where we stand on the different factors Moody's takes into consideration when adopting a rating. I'd also like to acknowledge the very good work that our partners do in getting to this point. Our financial advisor is Spear Financial. They have been our financial advisory firm for quite a long time. They do all of the number analysis. They prepare the official statement, a copy of which was in your packet. And they will host the online auction on Wednesday morning and work through that transition and evaluation of the bidders on Wednesday morning. Dan Forbes is in the audience from Sphere Financial. So if you have questions for him related to the bond market or what we might anticipate on Wednesday or Moody's rating or any of those things, he's here to answer those questions for you. But we also use Chapman and Cutler as our bond counsel, so they prepared the ordinance before you for consideration and approval and work through the legal issues on the bond issue. And I also just wanted to bring up the bond paying agent. This year, with this issue, we're using Amalgamated Bank of Chicago. That is a change. It is a very low cost item related to the bond issue, but I think it's noteworthy that we're bringing that local. We used Wells Fargo until 1 or 2 bond issues ago, and then we moved to Bank of New York Mellon. And I think it's nice that there's a slight cost savings, but even more so, moving to Amalgamated will bring it to Illinois, which I think is nice. So they all assist us in this process and getting to the point we're at today. So the recommendation for the City Council is to approve the proposed bond ordinance. Again, it is a parameters ordinance, so the actual information related to the awarded bid, if a bid is awarded on Wednesday, would be incorporated into a final ordinance for the bond closing. Happy to answer any questions or to drag Dan up here to answer any
Alderman
questions
Marino.
as well.
Thank you. Director Holub, I need your help in remembering, what term are we going for on the 19.5?
What term?
What's the duration of the bonds?
So we will go through 2033? 32. So we are not in any way changing the principal maturities by year. We are leaving the structure of the maturities the same, and then just counting on lowered interest payments to generate the savings.
Thank you.
Alderman Bushman.
Obviously, we're all very pleased with the AAA rating and the credit report. How comfortable were you with the analysis that was done in the credit report, the credit opinion? Anything there that you feel stands out that you'd like to share with us?
No, I was very comfortable. It was a little different than we'd had in the past. We actually received the scorecard prior to the rating call, the preliminary numbers, which I had never had that experience before, so that was noteworthy. I also thought it was interesting the non-financial questions that Moody's has begun asking. One of note was cyber security and what lengths we go to prevent ransomware attacks and those kind of, and we had a very good story to tell there. It was our first opportunity to do a deeper dive with Moody's on what we were doing from a pension funding standpoint and the change in approach. And Moody's was very complimentary about that. They were also very complimentary in the increased fund balance reserves as a bit of a hedge against any impact that the state fiscal crisis may bring to municipalities in the state. So, Dan, would you add anything that I missed on?
I think those are the two major points. Again, the pension is always a concern for Moody's, and the proactive, the plan for the city. I think both that and fund balance, as you've noted, are what they focus on.
It seemed very positive, though, at least from the perspective of the city in terms of the analysis.
Maybe it'd be good if you stepped up to the microphone so you could be on camera.
I think the other thing that is good and noteworthy is, would you want to talk about the outlook?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that question, so.
Yeah, I think that's good to hear too, because I think that's a positive.
As long as I don't get any questions on the bond market.
What's the number?
So you can't tell us exactly what's gonna happen on Wednesday?
Not quite yet. No, I get nervous about that, but I certainly, on the outlook side, I can tell you that Moody's has not in the past assigned the city an outlook, and typically does not assign an outlook for communities or that have a certain, what they consider sort of a smaller amount of outstanding debt. They usually assign outlooks for just larger communities or larger outstanding debt for those particular issuers. In this case, they went the extra step and, in an unusual case, assigned a stable outlook. That is very important to the bond market in that it says to them, for at least the next couple of years, we don't anticipate that there will be any sort of negative change. You're in the highest category right now, and that gives the investor an idea that, look, or at least an additional assurance. So I think they went the extra step. This is about the highest I think Moody's can go, at least in their current lexicon. And so I think that's a great positive, and I missed the other question, or I forgot the other question. I'm getting old. If there is one.
Just the overall comfort level, and even when they talk about the concerns, again, it seemed to be very positive in the outlook that they're giving the city.
Absolutely. And again, I've had the privilege of serving over a number of the bond issues for the city. This, I believe, was probably, and I'll bow to Elizabeth here, I think this was the most positive that Moody's has been. So I think that speaks to your financial management. And I must say, it's a great pleasure to work with Elizabeth. She's extremely professional and very helpful. And I think Moody's also trusts that, and it reflects in the management. So.
Hopefully, with all these good selling tools, you'll come back with an excellent number. Good luck.
No pressure.
No pressure.
You know, one thing about the outlook, and this is going back a few years, but my recollection was that a number of the surrounding communities have had either downgrades or affirmations, but with negative watch. I mean, that's been the trend that I remember. I don't know if that's still the trend. It's been a couple of years since I was in Alderman Morris's seat and you know, right there in the middle of all this. But
You're absolutely right. A few years ago, I think as Mayor Pantaleon was just leaving us as finance chair, we did bring you an analysis of 4 surrounding communities whose AAA rating had remained AAA, but with a negative outlook. All of those related to pensions and how they were addressing the pension challenges. So since then, they don't allow a negative outlook to stay for a very long period of time. They have to then go back and take action. Some were able to secure a AAA with no negative outlook, and at least one was downgraded.
At least a couple, I believe.
So Dan says actually a couple were downgraded. So that's kind of the warning to a AAA, and then they have a little bit of time to kind of take an action, and then Moody's come back and takes a firm stand on the rating at that point.
thank you. This is unqualified good news and a definite affirmation of a lot of the hard work that the council's been doing over the last couple of years to improve our overall financial picture in light of big macro negatives that are out there and the pension challenges. And it's the fact that we're making progress on these ratings and we can anticipate, you know, getting the best possible rate on this bond issue as a result is the most gratifying, really, kind of acknowledgement from the marketplace, not local opinions, but you know, the actual voting marketplace. Alderman Morris.
I just wanted to compliment the director and the city manager. This was a result of their initiative. I mean, we weren't after them. They went out, and the director Hallam went and said, you know, we can save some money here. Let's go through this effort to do the refunding. So it's a hats off to the director and her team and the city manager.
Hear, hear.
Any other?
Just to be clear, Elizabeth deserves all the credit. I'm happy to take a little, but really, this was entirely her initiative.
Well, and honestly, I share that with Dan, because Dan and I work together and we review it every once in a while. He has a much keener eye to the market and the trends and when the timing is right. And so I thank Dan for his proactive assistance as well.
Great, thank you. And we still have lower taxes than all those other communities. Anybody from the public that would like to comment on this bond refinance question? Okay, there being none, I would return it to the council for a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Did you get that, Betty?
I did.
You did, okay. It was a little, everybody was voting all at once. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Freshlack. Alderman Gushgarian.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Good luck on Wednesday morning. I'll look forward to the phone call. Next item on our agenda is opportunity for citizens to address the city council on non-agenda items. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the council about items that are not on our agenda tonight, but they'd like to be heard. Is there anybody? Okay. The next item is our omnibus agenda. I'm going to read 10 items. Bear with me here, but we'll get through them. The first is approval of the November 18th, 2019 City Council meeting minutes. Second is approval of the check register for the period of October 26th to November 22nd, 2019. Third is granting approval of the deed of gift of the original 1857 map of the city of Lake Forest to the Newberry Library in Chicago. Number 4 is consideration of acceptance of a gift from the Friends of Lake Forest Parks and Recreation Foundation demonstration project work incorporating the comfort station at Deer Path Golf Course into the city property. Fifth is consideration of an ordinance adopting the 4th supplement to the Code of Ordinances for the City of Lake Forest, incorporating recent code amendments into the official city code. We'll waive first reading and grant final approval on that. Number 6 is approval of International Association of Firefighters contract between the city and the Lake Forest firefighters and lieutenants. Number 7 is approval of bridge inspection services with Bleck Engineering totaling $23,125. Number 8 is an award of a contract with Advanced Tree Care for an amount not to exceed $38,000 as part of the MPI Tree Pruning Services joint bid for fiscal year 2020. Ninth is waiver of procedures and approval of all city expenditures for the purchase of a 14-passenger van with wheelchair capabilities in partnership with the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Citizens Foundation and an anonymous donor to Midwest Transit Equipment not to exceed $66,000. And number 10 is consideration of a recommendation from the Plan Commission in support of a special use permit to authorize the relocation of the Coldwell Banker Real Estate Office to 675 Forest Avenue. If desired by the council, will waive first reading and grant final approval of the ordinance. Are there any items on here that any member of the council would like to remove or take separately? There being none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
And if I may, actually, I just wanted to provide a couple brief comments on the successful negotiations and a successor collective bargaining agreement between the city and the firefighters union. Really just wanted to take the opportunity to commend all of the parties who were involved in that. Really proud of the effort of all involved to get us to this point. And I think, you know, the successful negotiation and the fairly timely manner in which it was achieved, I think speaks very highly to the state of the labor management relationship here. And again, that's a real credit to all parties involved. That really doesn't happen by accident. It takes a long time to develop those relationships, and I think really built on a level of trust and mutual respect and a spirit of compromise and cooperation. So I know we have several people in the room tonight who were involved in this, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge them. So representing the city on our negotiating team, we had Human Resources Director Deshay Kalmar, Fire Chief Pete Siebert, Deputy Chief Kevin Cronin, Battalion Chief Mike Gallo, and Assistant to the City Manager Mike Strong. And I saw him come in there. Also, just like to take the chance to thank the union's bargaining team as well. And that consisted of Lieutenant Mike Mounts, who was the president and is here tonight, as well as Lieutenant Matt Roush, firefighters Eric Farr, Nick Savell, and Patrick Issel. So again, congratulations to everybody for all their efforts getting us to this point, and just really proud of the way the whole process played out.
Great. Thank you. I think we're at the roll call vote.
Certainly. Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Kashgarian?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to add one thing, a note of thanks to the Preservation Foundation and the History Center, and more recently, the people at the Dunn Museum for all the hard work that, and research and exploration of options on the map donation. I think it's going to prove to be a worthy home. And also, we learned a little bit about the Dunn Museum in this whole process, and I gather it's rather new. So what we're going to do is sometime in the next couple of months, probably right after the first of the year, at a mutually convenient time, we'll have the Dunn Museum people come to the City Council and give us a presentation about the facility and capabilities that they have there. And so I just, again, extend my thanks and to Alderman Rummel for bringing the Dunn Museum more into our focus. The next items on our agenda are ordinances. First item on the agenda is consideration of an ordinance amending Chapter 135 titled Offenses Affecting Public Health, Safety, and Decency to bring these sections into alignment with legislation contained in the Illinois Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. First reading and, if appropriate, final approval. This is going to be presented to us by Chief of Police Carl Waldorf.
Well, good evening.
Welcome, Chief.
I think you're all aware that we're about a month away from the state's grand experiment in recreational marijuana. There was an article, a good article over the weekend on the lower left corner there in the Trib, which had a pretty good summary of what's changing statewide in 30 days on the 1st. So our task over the summer and the early fall was to work with our city prosecutors, Lawler, Zern, and Smith, on adapting our local ordinance to fit this new reality. Many of you are aware we've had a local ordinance concerning cannabis for many, many years, long before I worked here, or actually was born now I'm thinking about it. And unfortunately, it did contain a misspelling of tetrahydrocannabinol, which we're fixing today for the first time in my career, which is nice. So that's really our first edit. There are really 4 sections concerned tonight. 2 of them are edits, 2 of them are new sections. For a brief summary of the state changes, recreational cannabis is now legal as of the 1st throughout the state, but the Cannabis Control Act, which I have a copy of, 610 pages, I carry it with me everywhere I talk on this subject, but it does greatly restrict the amount of cannabis that can be possessed, where it can be carried, and where it can be used. And so that's really what we're rolling into local ordinance from state statute tonight. So the limitations in the middle of the paragraph there are the state possession limits. There are 3 different types of cannabis that are regulated. You can read it for yourself there. So that's the first part that we're rolling in here. Any amount of cannabis cannot be possessed by anyone under the age of 21. We did roll that into the statute, but over the age of 21, those are the 3 limits that apply for recreational possession. As we move on here, the act also covers plants. The original Cannabis Act from April of this year actually allowed for home grow for most residents of 5 or less plants. And the follow-up act, which actually became law, limited home grow to medical marijuana card holders. So our local ordinance does that as well. Language is copied directly from the state statute there. One of the 2 new sections concerns possession of cannabis in a motor vehicle. We copied this section verbatim from the state statute. The second new section covered where you can use cannabis, or more specifically, where you're prohibited from using cannabis. This is also copied from the state statute. And then finally, we changed the penalty section in this chapter so that it included the 2 new sections. So, I want to touch on a couple things we did not change in local ordinance, and our intent is to circle back when we've had a little experience with how the courts are going to look at these 2 sections. There is a state statute and a local ordinance for social hosting. The state statute went into effect in, I want to say, 2012, and ours was a year or 2 earlier. We're still unsure how the courts are going to look at social hosting, so we've chosen to hold off on editing our local ordinance. The act itself did not edit the state statute on social hosting, The state statute refers to illegal drugs, and our local ordinance refers to illicit drugs, but we're just not sure how the courts are going to feel about either of those terminologies. So at least in the short term, we're going to hold off, and especially our prosecutors are going to be watching both Lake County and the state just to see where courts are going on that issue before we act. I have a feeling we will circle back within a couple years once we have a feeling for what the judicial temperament is on this issue. And then the second section we didn't touch was drug paraphernalia, because this, more so than social hosting, we're really unsure what the judiciary is going to think of both the state and by extension our local ordinance. And so we'll probably circle back to that given a year or two to see whether the judiciary will allow us to prohibit cannabis-related drug paraphernalia, which is what our ordinance and state statute do now. So, any questions on either of those?
Alderman Marino?
So peeling back the regulations, and I certainly don't have a strong command. The intent is that adult use is in an adult private environment and not in any public space.
Right, and that's how the state statute is written. Sorry, here we are. So really the controlling subparagraph here is E, because it really refers to any public place. Now, we're gonna have to see how the courts feel about that. Some of the legislators have had some interesting examples of what use in a public place would be prohibited or not. I've seen quite a few quotes that I'm not sure courts will agree with. For example, I heard one legislator talked about if you were standing in your backyard and your neighbor was using cannabis in their backyard, that would constitute a public place because they could see you. I'm not sure many courts will go with that trend, and I've seen some other quotes that I'm just not sure the courts are going to uphold, so we'll really see how this goes. It would surprise me if the state didn't circle back from some changes within the next few years too, because I think the average complaint in Illinois will be people using cannabis around them and those people being uncomfortable, because you hear that from many people who travel to the other legalized states. So I think that will be a point of contention.
Thank you.
Alderman Bushman.
Along those same lines, I see in there it prohibits knowingly being in close proximity to anyone under the age of 21.
Right.
And you obviously have a question, what is close proximity? Again, neighboring yards with a child in the other yard.
Right.
Is that close proximity?
Yeah, and I think the courts are really going to have to tell us. There'll be a lot of arrests on this, statewide over the next year, 2 years, and it'll really be in the culmination of those individual court rulings that we decide, that we figure out what the judicial temperament is on that section. Good question.
Alderman Preschlack.
Chief, can you talk about possession in a car and then also impaired driving and how you're going to orient the force to that?
Sure. So we already enforce driving under the influence of cannabis, and we have, throughout my whole career. It's always been a little more difficult than DUI for alcohol because we don't have a presumptive test to use prior to an arrest. With alcohol, we can always use a portable breath tester. It's a very efficient device. It works quickly. It's very reliable. But we currently don't have a similar test for a pre-arrest test on the road for cannabis. Now there are a couple devices that are slowly coming out. Abbott actually has one that's being used in Michigan right now. But there's a couple hurdles that those devices have to pass here in Illinois. So I don't see them coming out in the next year or two, but eventually with all the states that are legalizing and the increase in DUI cannabis that all those states are experiencing, eventually the market will drive that. I'm fairly confident. But it is a little more difficult right now. Another factor that's difficult is under Illinois law, when we take post-arrest, when we take someone to a hospital for blood and urine test after an arrest, we have to get that blood and urine within 2 hours. And that's awful very difficult because all of the hospitals in the area are really full many hours of the day, even at 2, 3 in the morning. And patient care always has to come before our legal tests. And so sometimes 3 of the last 4 DUI cannabis arrests we made, the tests were actually more than 2 hours after the arrest. And so the actual test results were inadmissible. And that's pretty common. We're seeing that with a lot of our peers as well. So,
Alderman Rommel.
Can you expand a little bit on I think it was social hosting that you said you were unclear about? I think I know the whole social hosting issue, I think, came up in relatively recent years.
Right.
I think my kids were over 21. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but can you expand on
So
that?
the basic concept of social hosting, both the state statute and a local ordinance, is it prohibits someone, an adult, from either functioning alcohol or drugs to minors or allowing a place where they reasonably should have known minors were consuming alcohol or drugs. And so we've been enforcing that since we've had a local ordinance and elsewhere in the state since there's been a state statute. It's not the most common statute we enforce, but several times a year we certainly do. Now, we have not encountered a situation in anyone's living memory where that social hosting arrest was based on either provision of cannabis or provision of a place to use cannabis. So that's one of the reasons why we didn't want to act right away on modifying the social host ordinance until we saw what the courts were going to do with it.
Other questions? Okay, opportunity for public comment on these ordinance changes? Anybody from the public would like to comment? Okay, there being none, then I would turn it back to the council for a motion to waive first reading and grant final approval to this recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Morris? Aye. Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Rommel?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Kashkarian?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy. Thanks, everyone. Next item on the agenda is new business. And Mike Thomas, Director of Public Works, will make a little presentation on an ordinance to authorize the city manager to enter into a one-year pilot agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for the plowing and salting of Route 43 from Route 176 to Route 22 and Route 60 from Route 41 to Field Drive for the winter of 2019 and 2020, subject to legal review and approval to purchase an additional 1,000 tons of road salt from Lake County's Morton Road Salt bid for $66,000 or $66,281.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. To give you some context, we'll take ourselves back 2 weeks ago to Veterans Day when we received about 3 or 4 inches of snow. We had our crews out. IDOT had their crews out as well, but the following days that followed that storm, social media really lit up about the quality of job that IDOT had done on Waukegan and 60. And this is a trend that we've seen for a while. They've got some challenges that I'm going to highlight tonight, but that brings us to this point where the city manager asked us to investigate the option of plowing 60 in Waukegan. So to plow or not to plow, that is the question. To do that, I'm going to review with you this evening very briefly our snow operations so you understand what we do, how we do it, IDOT's operations and the challenges they have. And if City Council were to agree for us to proceed, how would we go and do that efficiently, and then open it up for question and answer. With regards to our snow plan priorities, so we obviously hit all the streets at the very beginning. Municipal Services Building has a lot of people coming to it, so we work on the sidewalks there. We then obviously work on parking lots and sidewalks around town. We work on the sidewalk on McKinley Road between Illinois and Westminster, where all the bus traffic for the C&W train station, we want to make sure that is cleared. We then will get to the school sidewalks that are within a quarter mile of all the schools. Once we get that done, we're working on the rest of the sidewalks. Our compost center, because we collect recyclables 4 days a week and the weekends it's open, we've got to have that compost center open for transfer trailers to come in early morning. Then we get to the West Park Ice Pond. So we have a lot to do. Usually we try and hit all of this concurrent. The ice pond is usually at the dead end, but it really depends upon the storm. If we're getting hit hard, it might take us a day until we start sidewalks. If it's a light snow, easy, no problem. If it's happening at 5:30 during rush hour, totally different than 4 a.m. on a Saturday. So the amount of snow, the time of day has a lot of impact on that. Manpower-wise, we have 33 guys from both Parks, Forestry, Cemetery, and our Public Works operations that will jump on the snowplows and attend to all this. We do not include sanitation and engineering. Sanitation needs to finish their routes. And then engineering, all the projects that were approved last month at the finance meeting, those guys are working on trying to get all that stuff done and out to bid. However, at nighttime and on the weekends, those guys become part of this. So the sanitation guys will come off their routes. They'll take a half-hour break, and we'll put them out in trucks till about 10 o'clock at night, get them home, because they, quite frankly, live pretty far away, most of them, and then they got to turn around and get back early in the morning. Those numbers then, 46, does not include vacation and sick, so we've got to take that off depending upon what our net numbers are. We typically have upwards of 8 guys off, just because we want to, quite frankly, burn through that vacation time. We don't want all of the guys taking off 3 or 4 weeks in the summer. We've got to spread that out. So we allow vacation time in the winter months. The lineup sheet, we go ahead, our street supervisor and our forestry supervisor are the ones running Snow Command this year. This is just an example of the lineup sheet that they go through and put together who's going to be on which routes. Everybody is on call. So if we have a heavy storm, even though you're starting out, you might be called in later, and everybody knows that. So we'll put together Schedule A, this is the first group, and if the storm's going to keep going, Schedule B, guys, you're going to be coming in. Equipment, we've got a number of dump trucks, different size dump trucks depending upon where we're working. We do have a semi-truck, a handful of end loaders, and then skid steer and track loaders that we use on the sidewalks. So IDOT's approach and their challenge. We are in District 1 in IDOT, which happens to be the largest district that IDOT has. It encompasses 6 counties, Lake Cook, McHenry, Kane, DuPage, and Will. They are having a big challenge of acquiring people. We went and met with them, and truly their hearts are in it, just like all of our hearts. We want to do a good job. We know why we're here. They're having a very difficult time finding people to work. The economy is good, and they're having a very difficult time. They have currently 2,775 miles of roadway. Compared to us, we have 120 miles. So 2,775, that is within District 1 only. Route 43 and 60, the equipment for those 2 state roads come out of the Gurney shop. So the reason I noted that is it's important to think about when they're out of salt and they're out of fuel, they got to get back up to their Gurney shop. And if it's, as I said, Tuesday at 5:30, they're sitting in traffic with everyone else. That you begin to understand the picture that these guys are dealing with. It's challenging for them. They have actually put out their 3rd time a job ad to try and get people to sign up to be temporary snowbirds, they call them. We went ahead and met with them on October 20th. They have currently agreements with 53 municipalities in their district for 12-month maintenance of state roads. We went ahead and asked, well, do you have any winter-only agreements? They had one in 2016 with Lake County, and they said it was very successful. So we asked for a copy of that because, quite frankly, we're not really interested in 12-month maintenance of 60 in Waukegan. Right-of-way mowing, tree trimming, sewer repairs, roadway repairs, we're not set up to handle 55-mile-an-hour roads. So they've got 23 maintenance facilities in District 1 that they pull all this equipment from. And their shortfall, as I said, that storm 2 weeks ago, they had approximately 30% of what they should have as far as plow drivers to cover that entire district. They're having a very difficult time finding people. So what do they do to accommodate? They will actually move equipment from various counties. So if Lake and McHenry County are getting hit with snow, they'll bring equipment up from DuPage and Cook to try and offset that as best they can. They actually are approaching Lake County to try and develop a simple handshake agreement this winter that says, as the county trucks are going to their routes and they cross over a state route, could you drop the plows and salt? So if Lake County is going to St. Mary's, they're going to plow St. Mary's, they're going to be going over 137. They're asking if the county would plow 137 and vice versa. But as we left, they were getting ready to ask that. They obviously then net, if they cannot get anywhere with this and acquire more personnel, their route size increases. So their optimal route size is about 30 miles. Right now, they're at 80 miles, and that obviously has a very large impact. We are, for comparison purposes, at 12 miles. Again, different though. They're going 45 miles an hour. We're plowing Northmore subdivision, and we're pushing back corners. So different, but nonetheless, they've got a lot of miles to fill. So how would we go about this if we were to do it? At the beginning of any storm, we would take some of our equipment that has wing plows, the plow off on the side, that plow. We have 3 trucks that have wing plows, actually 4. We'd put them out on 60 in Waukegan, and we would do our best to quickly knock out Waukegan from 22 to 176, 60 from 41 to Field Drive. When we would get those plowed, we would leave our largest truck out there, and that truck would stay on those 2 roads throughout the storm. The other guys would then go and start their routes in the neighborhoods. If things became too much for that one truck, we would have to pull trucks off some of our residential routes and get back to knocking out Waukegan and 60. As those pieces of equipment finish up their routes, they obviously, as they're coming back in, we'll see if any additional work needs to happen on 60 and Waukegan. So we're not naming specific routes. We're simply saying in general that we're going to put 3, 4, 5 guys out on 60 and Waukegan. They'll knock it out as quick as they can, again, depending upon Tuesday afternoon, 5:30 p.m. is totally different than Sunday morning at 4 a.m. And the response then out to their neighborhood routes will be different as well. But that is what our plan would be. The one little concern that we have is it leaves us 2 spares, which in the world of trucks might sound like a lot, but we know from history through all these events, equipment breaks down. And it is, most of the time, it's nothing significant. But if you lose a wiper motor or blower motor at 2:30 in the morning, now what? Okay, that's Whispering Oaks and Waveland truck. We got to somehow backside that. We went ahead and looked at our costs for how many events we've had. On average, over the past 4 years, we average about 18 plowing, salting events per season. So we went ahead and we took that, along with calculating the number of plowing miles, lane miles that we'd need to plow, and the rates that IDOT typically does, and we calculated how much salt. So conservatively, we're saying an additional 1,000 tons of salt. We assumed each event, looking back at all of our time cards and our Excel spreadsheets, each event averages about 11.5 hours, half of it straight time, half of it overtime. So we put all those numbers together. We went and looked at our fuel usage on the trucks, which trucks we'd be putting out there, and we came up with a total of approximately $88,000. Again, based on 18 events. If it turns out to be 23, it's going to be more. If it's going to be less, it's less. But that is, in general, the numbers we think we're going to be landing around. So, to sum it up, putting together this pilot agreement with IDOT, we have met with IDOT in Schaumburg. They are very interested. They know the problem that they have ahead of them. We have determined what manpower and equipment we need to go ahead and do 60 in Waukegan. We've estimated our salt needs. We've estimated, obviously, straight time and overtime. We did take the Lake County 2016 agreement, and Julie Tappendorf and Irma both reviewed it and said they were okay. They found the terms to be acceptable. I relayed that back to the state, and the state said, okay, they're going to be working on an agreement, if City Council so desires, an agreement that mirror images that county agreement 3 years ago. We then obviously would request your approval to authorize the city manager to enter into the agreement, assuming our city council and IRMA approve the terms, and then additional salt purchase as well. Biggest thing out of all of this in the end, though, is that we will need your support out of this whole presentation. We need your support, and here's why. It's going to take us longer to get to these routes. So people call us, they walk, when are you going to get the sidewalks done? When's West Park going to be done? We work uptown, when are you going to haul? Those questions we get during every storm, but this is sort of reality. So we can do it. We're proposing to do it for 1 year, 1 season, see if it works. If it does, great. If it's something that we need to tweak, fine. But in the end, that I think is going to be a big deal, because you will receive phone calls. That's going to be part of this. We do after every storm, but we're just going to need your support saying, okay, these guys are doing 33 more miles. They're getting there, and we don't stop. We don't stop and say, you know, we'll go ahead and handle that the next day. We keep going. So with that, I will entertain any questions you may have.
Alderman Preschlack?
Yeah, so Mike, thanks a lot for the presentation. I appreciate it. So I think that's the key question is, you know, what would be the service drop-off for the neighborhood routes? You can, you know, solve one problem but create some others, and just wanted to make sure that if we assume the same service levels, that maybe we could forecast a worst-case scenario, either taking those 2 idle trucks and putting them into play or whatever. But I think anytime that we reduce the service across a good, you know, swath of the community, during a storm to add on new stuff, we could have another issue. So I'm just curious what your general gut is on that.
The calculation, our guys were looking again at how much time it takes them to complete their routes, and again, averaging 12 miles, extrapolated out to 33 miles. Again, depending upon traffic, about an hour to an hour and a half. Not the entire city system. We're not going to take our 11 routes and put 11 trucks on 60 in Waukegan and say Lake Forest will get to you when we're done. We're just going to put a handful of them, 2 or 3. And those 2 or 3 will be impacted, we think, by about an hour to an hour and a half. The key, though, if it's a heavy storm, that one truck is going to do his best to stay up on 60 in Waukegan going back and forth. But if it gets really bad, we'll need to call a couple of those guys back. So a lot of it, Alderman Preschlack, truly does come down to available personnel. We're pretty lean. We pull everybody, whether they're working on an HVAC unit or repairing a pipe or picking up garbage. They're part of this thing. It's a big team effort. So that's just in general our thoughts going into it.
And, you know, I can also add that because there are plenty of unknowns, I think that's one of the main reasons that we were recommending treating this as a 1-year pilot, because as we move into the spring and summer next year, we'll have much more data to better understand what the impacts are on the department and the service levels throughout the community. I give Mike Thomas a lot of credit and his staff. I think Dan Martin and Matt Bergioni are both here, and they really stepped up to the challenge in a very short period of time, trying to analyze the operational impact. And I have a lot of confidence in what they put together. But as I just said, there are some unknowns we won't know until, if the council so desires, we go down that road, no pun intended. And so, again, I'm confident it can be done based on what they've shared with me, you know, without the need to hire additional personnel, but we'll know more in a few months.
One thing I should add, late this afternoon, we did receive a call from IDOT. They knew we were having this meeting this evening, and they have been working hard on their end. As you can imagine, they have many different departments: the agreement department, the budget department, the operational department. They've got to get things cleared at Springfield. But they recognize the problem they are having in Lake County, specifically, and not being able to have plow drivers. They actually have equipment. 3 years ago, their equipment was junk, but they've invested into that. But they're having just a heck of a time finding guys. They called us late this afternoon and said, we think we can have an agreement to you by Friday. And they have a calculation where they look at average number of daily trips, the speed of the roadway, the width, number of lane miles, all of that, and they put together a calculation. So they've provided that to us as well.
And maybe I would just add too, as a final point, again, normally it would be presented before the city council with an intergovernmental agreement in place for the council to consider. The reason for the request tonight is really just due to the anomaly of our holiday meeting schedule. And so after tonight, the council won't convene again until, mid to late January. And our concern was by then we could have had a half dozen snow events. And so, I have to say I was pleased with IDOT's responsiveness to this. They've been moving pretty quickly, but sometimes the wheels of government still move slow. And so, unfortunately, we didn't have an intergovernmental agreement in place for the council to consider tonight, but I just wanted to sort of clarify why the request is structured the way it is.
Alderman Moreno.
Thank you. I think this is much more than a time and materials analysis, and it gets back to Alderman Preschlack's comments. I think that it's going to have an impact not only on the time it takes per event to do everything that we do. I think it's going to impact staff's ability to do its everyday jobs. So I recognize that there's a time and materials analysis, a project management analysis to this, but I think that there's the potential for a cost above that, and I'm concerned that the contract, the intergovernmental agreement, won't have a mechanism to capture that, and that we might not have a mechanism to measure that. And so I raise the flag on it because I think it's important for us to understand we have limited manpower. We have a safety need on these streets. We kind of need to do this. I believe that. But I also believe that the cost to do it to us is higher than we think it's going to be. And so I wonder if there aren't other ways to share cost, such as equipment leasing arrangement with IDOT. And maybe it's not for this season, maybe it's for a future season. But I think that there are other ways to cost share that might help us to digest the real cost of this, not just the economic cost of it.
Right. And that is one thing, you're right, that I think we can consider down the road. I will say the positives is that municipal services is right there. If we're out of fuel and salt, it's a quick number one. Number two, compared to IDOT, we literally put a truck on these two roads and that truck stays. IDOT, as we said, has got 80 miles. They'll knock Waukegan and 60 out, and they've got to keep moving on. Gurnea is farther away. There's different things that make sense to us, but we will be truly evaluating after every single event. We're not gonna, we quite frankly don't want to open it up to all of our guys, not yet, because it's gonna be different than what they're used to, and we want to really peg down time, how much salt they're using. We really want to get good data on it. Conversely, we know that if we enter into this agreement, we have an obligation, we have a responsibility, and those roads, although IDOT has tried for many years, they're not that safe. They truly aren't. And there's a lot of drifting that goes on in front of West Campus and out down near Old Mill. And we think we can do a better job. But myself, Dan Martin, Chuck Myers, the upper management that's overseeing this, we're going to keep our eyes and ears open on everything. What are the breakdowns like? The guys, are they working well? Are they getting the feel of it? So I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Alderman Oates.
Director Thomas, two questions. One, with the numbers that you put together, is the intergovernmental agreement going to be a per event agreement that or you're budgeting 18 events and we could be over budget or under budget,
The
which
latter.
opens a risk.
The latter. The number they came back today with was just shy of 90,000. It's a flat rate, $90,000 based on their whole calculation. So it is truly, if there's 23 events, we're responsible for getting it done. If there are 3 events, there's 3 events. But the state pays the city flat rate of $90,000. On the 12-month agreements that they have with the 53 municipalities, it's the exact same thing. They don't come back and say, well, gosh, you've repaired 18 potholes, where last year you only repaired 2. And this year you've got a storm sewer break. Last year, flat, here's the number. And that's the way they work it.
Thank you. And the only other thing I'd like to say is, yes, there are qualitative issues, Alderman Moreno, but residents, we're talking about 2 of probably the busiest streets in our city, and the quality and safety of our residents is paramount, and I think blows away any potential other qualitative measures that you might be coming up with. So absolutely recognize we need to make sure we're throwing everything in the bucket we can, but there are paramount issues here that are overriding the importance of this decision.
One of the things, just as a side note, with Morton Salt, when I contacted them last week, they have availability, but they have their volume of salt that they are looking to, quote, lock up. So it's a time issue. we just can't call them every other week and say, can we have another 200 tons? They've got a certain amount sitting down in Calumet City, a certain amount in Summit, a certain amount up in Milwaukee, and when those piles are called for, they are called for, period. So that's part of this is we've got to, if we're going to do it, we got to get to them to say, we'll take another 1,000, please.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Mike, thank you for the work that you've put in on it, and obviously you've spent a good amount of time. And I would echo Alderman Notes' concerns in terms of really these being the two major thoroughfares in our community. And we recognize that residents have certain service expectations, and we do realize that those are state highways, but my biggest concern is that we don't do something or walk away from it because the cost benefit may not be in the city's favor. But we have school buses traveling on those roads. We have friends and neighbors, spouses, children, parents, and I'm attaching a certain ethical value to it. Certainly we don't have the legal obligation to do it, but we hear enough people expressing concern, and we've all heard it for sure. But it may just be one of those things that we have to say, look, we know that your neighborhood is going to be plowed an hour later, but this is important enough where we have to start prioritizing some of our issues. And much as the same we do with some of our stormwater management issues and other components of city governance. This might be one where we have to say this may be a priority, and doing it to the most efficient means possible, obviously. But my concern is that we've been fortunate so far. We don't know. We have no way of predicting what these events are going to be, and realizing that IDOT is probably doing the best that they can do. But if we can do better, I think we're obliged to do it, at least on some level of ethical awareness.
If you think of the hospital, West Campus, and our business district, West Side Business District, you put all three of those together, and you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Sports after school out at West Campus, the hospital, I'm sure there are many Lake Forest residents that use those areas and drive 60 in Waukegan. So we all drive it.
Alderman Rummel.
So what would it take to not have to have our side streets or our local streets suffer as a result of this decision? I mean, we're talking about the possibility that we would be delayed in plowing our regular streets that are the city's responsibility. Is there a win-win out of this so that we could not have that delay? What would it take to not delay plowing our regular streets and still accomplish plowing these two state routes?
Additional manpower. period. Quite frankly, an additional truck would be very helpful. Those are about $250,000 a pop, but additional manpower. We are very thin, just absolutely very thin. Can we try ourselves to see if we can find snowbirds? Can we call Peter Baker? Can we call RJ Underground, Demuth? Can we call contractors that are wrapping up for the season and say, do you have any experienced CDL drivers? This is, they're going to be driving either a 45 or 65,000 pound vehicle with 2 plows on them. You need to have people that know what they're doing and that Tuesday afternoon at 5:45 are relaxed. When they're sitting at Waukegan and 60 and there's cars everywhere, they're calm, they know what they're doing, they're not going to get pushed. So it's manpower.
So do you think we'd be talking 1 more driver, 2 more drivers?
Two more drivers.
At a cost of, what do we think?
Depending upon what we pay them. I highly doubt they're going to come for an hourly rate anywhere south of 30, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be higher than that. These guys, when they're with their construction firms, they're making union wages, which is much higher than 30 an hour.
Well, so when we're talking safety, I'm equally concerned about our school buses on our side streets and going through intersections, wherever that may be. So, I'm wondering if, and this has been an incredibly thorough look at all of the parameters, and I congratulate you and the staff on doing this, but, I wonder if maybe we should consider, making a win-win out of this, such that that we can accomplish both things in a timely manner and really get our streets cleaned all the way around.
If we can find, if we are able to find some additional manpower, if there's an expense to that, but if we can find some additional manpower, that would be very helpful.
And then my other question is, it's my understanding that after a certain time of year, we plow only intersections in some of these areas, correct?
So our salt policy says December 1, January 15th, we salt everything. January 15th to February 30th, mid-March, we will do the mains, and then hills, curves, intersections of the side streets. So give us a straightaway on Buena. Buena is not going to necessarily get salt. If we're on a hill or a curve, it'll get some salt.
So does that help in our manpower allocation at all? No, just our
not at all. It
salt
is simply from an environmental standpoint and a financial standpoint. But that is a challenge that myself, Dan Martin, Chuck, Matt Bergioni, Corey, we have to weigh that every single time. There is the safety side of this thing, and there is the let's not put down as much salt to save money and be environmentally good stewards. And for every storm, mid-January on, that is running through our heads. And we always opt for safety, but if we can scrape things up and minimize the salt, then we'll do that. But no, it doesn't, that will not lend anything to the additional manpower challenge.
And while you're talking about the environment, you know what my next question is going to be?
Beet heat, we've switched. Beet juice. So one of the things we use and we've done for a long time is salt brine. So our salt spreaders have liquid tanks on them. They'll spray the salt as it is being dropped onto the road to essentially add weight to the salt kernel so it doesn't bounce into the parkway, and it activates the salt right away. When that temperature drops below 15, the salt brine doesn't work. So we usually, in the past, have gone to calcium chloride, which is extremely caustic. And the guys have got a big chemical suit when they're putting it on. Last year we did a trial error off of Old Mill with beet heat, which is beet juice, a little bit of calcium chloride, but they adjust the sugar levels, and it's a natural product. And what we found was that we didn't have to return to the routes anywhere near as quickly as if we had just used salt brine or calcium chloride. It's going to cost us a little bit more money, but I think in the long run, it's going to be a better product. It's going to buy us time. If it does nothing else, it buys us time not to have to head back to the route so quickly.
Great.
So it's a good
Worked out
addition.
to be
And we're
a
going to
good-
use it citywide starting this year.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, be it as it may, I think we might consider adding some personnel to this, but that's a decision for later.
Yeah, well, the good thing is this is a one-year test and we can evaluate it, and I guess that, I just wanted to get my one question in, which is, it's a one-year thing, we can reopen this discussion with them after we have the data, right? A year from now. So I think hugely valuable to take this opportunity to get the data that we will then use to reopen some of this, you know, a year from now. Alderman Bushman?
I'd echo the importance of the fact that we're looking at a one-year pilot program, and I'd also emphasize the fact of the timing that we're facing here. We've had one episode and a bad experience on 6043 this year. As you said, it seems to be a trend, something that's carried over from prior years. I appreciate staff making its best efforts to try and get the state to do a better job, but obviously they've indicated to you no can do, at least not in the near term. We're not seeing that. So it does leave us with the problem, what can we do now? And again, not only with the schedule, but we are now into December, we are now into winter. Even though the 5-day forecast doesn't predict anything here locally, who knows what Mother Nature holds not too far out. So we really do need to act, and if we cannot rely upon the state, we'd be fools to say, well, let's just live it, you know, suffer through another challenging, unsafe situation on 6043. That's not acceptable. Second point I'd like to make is to compliment staff for making this effort to figure out what you can do for our city, what our people can do, how much more you can do. And yes, there is a cost factor here, no question about it. We'd love to have a fully reimbursable cost, you know, an open, not a fixed price, covered fixed and variable costs, cover us totally, maybe a little profit. That's not going to happen. But that says, you know, let's go through the private pilot program. Let's see what we can do, and we'll have more time then to consider the economics, and maybe we can get some latitude with IDOT to negotiate a type of contract that gives us more comfort going forward, if that is the situation that we want to do. But again, I do appreciate all the works by Public Works in bringing this to us. And I think, you know, even though it will be more challenging, but keep in mind, the more challenging the winter, I think the more happy we will be overall to see 60 and 43 plowed a heck of a lot better than it's been in the past.
Correct.
Alderman Morris.
Yeah, I'd just like 2 points. One, to follow up on Alderman Rummel's point, maybe as a result of this year project, that one of the outcomes is an analysis, to her point, about what we might do to meet the overall needs over the course of the winter for both these particular roads and the community. So if you could come back with a statement, yeah, we could add 2 trucks or whatever, or everything's fine, whatever, but some assessment of what she proposed would be helpful. And then the second point is, we're authorizing you, the city manager and the city attorney, to negotiate this agreement, and we won't see it again until January. So I think it'd be prudent to have somebody from the city council to be part. I would nominate the mayor, by the way, to be part of this team that are doing the negotiating. So we at least have one elected official in the mix on this.
Good idea. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. I'd like to add another sort of broader point here, which is we've had a lot of conversation tonight about financial management, stewardship, risks being imposed on us, costs being imposed on us from the outside, and the fact that Moody's just reaffirmed our rating and also put us on stable watch, despite all the challenges we're dealing with from the state. They did that because of our aggressive attention to the pension issue, and because of our aggressive attention over the last several years to building up our reserves, for which we've been criticized by many people. This is a perfect example of a situation where costs are being imposed on our city because our state is not doing its job. And we are having to bear those costs and those risks. And we have the reserves to do it, and it's a non-issue financially for us. And we should be thankful for what's going on around here financially, and you know, look at what this council has done over the last 4 or 5 years to put us in this position. Because there will be more. There'll be many, many more of these things over the next decade, I assure you. So I'd like to hear from the public on this, if there's anybody from the public that would like to speak. Okay, in that case, I would return it to the council for a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote?
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Notes?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Kashgarian?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. This is a great step forward, I think, for us to get this, take this thing by the throat and wrestle it to the ground, because it's been an issue for years, and it's gotten intolerable to all of us. So thank you all for Mike, for your work, the city staff, and thank you to the council for you know, taking a constructive view toward this. The last item on our agenda is additional items for discussion, comments by council members. Are there any items that any member of the council would like to speak about? Okay. Then I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Well, thank you all. Have a wonderful holiday. Shop local. Enjoy all the wonderful things that Lake Forest has to offer at the holidays, and we will see you in 2020.